Hello and welcome to episode 299 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we talk about Dortmund's lucky Revier Derby draw and Wednesday's DFB Pokal match against Borussia Mönchengladbach that Dortmund managed to defeat, also quite fortunately 1-0 last week. And for all that and more joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias. It's good to have you here to talk about the weekend and the upcoming midweek game. I'm excited to talk to you. I'm not sure if I'm excited to talk about the topic, but I have to say I'm in good spirits. Apart from the Revier Derby, the Packers won. The Sixers, for the first time since 2013, apparently went 2-0 in the start of the season, and Donald Trump got thoroughly booed at a baseball game, so that really filled my heart with joy. So, Matthias, how are you doing? How was your weekend, apart from those 90 minutes at the Veltins Arena?
Well, the nice thing is, on Sunday, the Broncos lost with a last-second field goal, and Tottenham lost to Liverpool. So, at least the Cowboys couldn't lose because they had a bye week, but the Astros are now ahead in the World Series. So things are, I'd say, about 50-50 somewhere, somehow. But it's a snow day here in Colorado, so no work, no school, just hanging out and spending some time with you, Stefan.
Yes, that's very nice. I'm glad you were snowed in so that we could record a show. But yeah, we've been reprimanded a little bit for always being the negative Nancys on the show. And I apologize for that. I try to be in more positive spirits. I guess if we look at the positives after the Revier Derby, which was very drab, and it's not that easy to be, upbeat about it, but Dortmund kept a clean sheet. And I would, even though Schalke hit the post or the crossbar, Dortmund did not concede from a set piece, which is, I think, progress when we look at recent Revier Derbies. And the I think, crossbar hit from Salif Sané was a little bit under opponent pressure. Yes, he outjumped Axel Witsel, but at least there was someone right next to him to outjump and not just, being completely open and heading home. So that's an improvement. Also, Dortmund outlasted Schalke in terms of energy because Dortmund were very economical about their game and then had 15 minutes left to win the game against the run of play. But nevertheless, Dortmund had these 15 minutes, which actually improved and looked a little bit more like football, apart from everything else that we've seen before. And after the game, Lucien Favre was self-critical and maligned the vertical runs. And Michael Sorg, in true Stefan Butzko fashion, said that automatisms are lacking right now. And another positive that I have is that chances are Dortmund are going to remain unbeaten against Schalke this season, which did not work out for them last season. But I hope and assume that in the home game next year in 2020, Dortmund will also not lose. So these are my list of positives. There are maybe a couple more, but this is the first things I could come up with where maybe we can cling on, Matthias. So before we dive into the game and complain endlessly, and then hopefully find the arc to be positive again, what are your positives right off the bat?
Marvin Hitz probably had his best match as a Dortmund keeper, in my opinion. He played very, very well. Overall, Mats Hummels again played exceedingly well. In my opinion, probably with Hitz, the two best Dortmund players on the day. Dortmund did not allow Schalke to go top of the table, even though it only would have been short-lived, because Gladbach, of course, won. Leipzig lost again, so that's good. I still don't know how Freiburg is still where they are, but that's testament to who their manager is. And I will also say positively, I noted some emotional outbursts from Lucien Favre on the touchline, which I really liked. That was nice to see. And other than that, I mean, you named a lot of the positives. And another positive is no matter how bad Jadon Sancho plays, he can still create chances and be a very dangerous player. So there's that.
Yeah, as far as I know, Jadon Sancho was really the only one that actually had chances for Dortmund, as low quality they were, but he had a couple of shots from distance right at the start, I would say. He had one, obviously, when I closed my eyes and try to picture the Revier Derby, the most regretful moment maybe came, I don't even know which minute, but very late. It was when Julian Brandt had this little through ball aimed at Marco Reus, who just missed again, just inches away from it. That could have been, the old smash and grab for Dortmund and really put the game on its head. But nevertheless, I also, at first I was a bit disgruntled that after Delaney had to go off, that Lucien Favre brought on Akanji, but in hindsight, I have to say that putting Akanji into the center back position and then moving Weigl up front next to Witsel, I think this also had a positive effect. And yes, Schalke got more tired and their pressing wasn't as good as it used to be in the 70 minutes beforehand. But nevertheless, you still need a bit more cohesiveness in the final third and in the second third of the pitch. And Dortmund brought that. It still wasn't up to the levels where we all would be satisfied with, but at least it was better. So, there are a couple of things to look on the bright side here. Dortmund obviously had the, more possession. The pass success, Dortmund were also better, but, 79% is nothing to be really proud of. But against a pressing team like Schalke, which can call them now, that was bound to happen, and maybe one of the major criticisms as we go forward. But also like to see Lucas Piszczek back as a right back and not Akanji, and Rafael Guerreiro as a left back. I wasn't sure if I think Nico Schulz could have played right, but at least after Schulz's quite poor performance against Inter Milan, I was glad to have Guerreiro back in there to have a little bit more playing skill. So I guess in terms of lineup choices and starting Götze and whatnot, I was actually quite content. Obviously, it did not amount to the level that Dortmund would actually dominate Schalke in the form and fashion they should be doing with the team they currently have. So that's disappointing, but it was still good. Now, Matthias, I asked Lars this question on the preview episode, and my question to him was whether it would be wise to play Marco Reus, knowing that he has a history in a Revier Derby where this game sort of goes to his head and he just then has utterly terrible games. And again, I thought in these 90 minutes we saw a lot of miscontrols, a lot of bad first touches, and just a lot of hesitance when it came to decision making. And I think Marco Reus was actually quite self-critical about that. Do you think that going forward it would be wise to leave him out if he's not in a hot streak of absolutely blistering form?
No, I think you leave him out if he's still recovering from the flu, because I don't care who you are. You don't get through and over and back to 100% fitness with the flu in 4 or 5 days. That's just not going to happen. So if he's not at 100% physical form, I think then you can't play him, or you should at least put him on the bench and maybe bring him on later if you need to. As far as blistering form, Marco Reus is kind of that type of player that can always just turn it on in a magical moment, kind of like we saw with Jadon Sancho at times, or Götze at times, where it's just they just need those couple of moments, and all of a sudden, bam, you score a goal. So I don't think if he's physically fit, you can't not start him, in my opinion. But you could maybe put him on the bench, maybe bring him in for the last 30 minutes if he's just not in peak fitness, which I just don't think he could have been following he the previous weekend he had the flu. He didn't play against Inter because of the flu. So I can't imagine he was 100% there.
No, he certainly was not. Anyway, I think it's fair to shift the focus a little bit on Schalke, and you said that before the show, and I think the Deutsche Welle had an article on that, an opinion piece, which basically said that Schalke right now are better than the sum of its parts, or however you want to call it. And I think David Wagner has done a magnificent job. He said after the game that he was very happy with his team's performance, and then said, they just played as they had in recent weeks. And I think for Schalke, this is a sign of consistency and a cohesive plan, let's say, that is working out. Obviously, there will be question marks, of course, because they have a quite thin squad. How long they can carry out this style of play, which is very intense over a season. But, from the Dortmund times of wide pressing, we know you can carry this actually quite far. And, especially if you manage to score 2 or 3 goals, within the first hour or so, then you should be fine. Obviously, scoring goals sometimes is a problem for Schalke, but I still think they are outperforming their expected goals. So, Matthias, do you think that Schalke are on a trajectory to become a Champions League club again, or with the style of play, or do you think this is too soon to say? And knowing that Schalke are Schalke, there will be the inevitable sabotage that lets them all down again, because right now I think for once they've actually found a match on the sideline.
Well, I think I hold Wagner in pretty high regards, but I think Champions League is way premature. They need to have a better quality squad first to really speak of that, because they broke down physically pretty dramatically 15 minutes before the end. It was almost right on 75 minutes. They were totally spent. There was just nothing left. And even when they brought...
No, I usually only witness that when I watch Formula One.
Yeah.
And sometimes the tire grip just completely falls off a cliff. And we saw that there with Schalke too. They just completely were empty. Just like literally empty. I was actually quite amazed that Dortmund didn't manage to capitalize on that better.
Yeah, and then you see who they bring in. Kutucu, who's, young, but... he's super raw, and honestly, you could have made an argument for a red card with him or Salif Sané, in my opinion. But be that as it may, I just don't think the quality is quite there yet. You mentioned when Dortmund was under Klopp, pressing and flying all over the place. You can't forget the type of players he had in the squad. And you look at Schalke, there's no Lewandowski. Burgstaller is not Lewandowski. Matondo might be Aubameyang, given how many chances he misses. But, they don't have a Hummels, they don't have a Gundogan. I don't really rate their fullbacks very well. So I think they're overperforming, and to me, that's all down to the manager, because it's not a huge different squad to what Tedesco had. In my opinion, it shows that Tedesco's overrated as a manager, and Wagner maybe was underrated, given what he got out of a less than mediocre Huddersfield Town side, a really bad quality Huddersfield Town side. And he obviously has more talent at his disposal now at Schalke, but it's still nowhere near the quality of the squad that over the course of the season Dortmund, Bayern, Leipzig, in my opinion, also Gladbach have at their disposal. But they can definitely continue to have decent results. Obviously, there's always a chance for bad results, like saw against Hoffenheim, where they lost last weekend and didn't score. So this is 2 straight matches where they weren't able to score. And those are the kind of things where you may want to go, do we have issues here? Because Burgstaller, he's maybe the prototypical Austrian Grantler, who complains a lot and yells a lot. He's a poor man's Mandzukic. in that sense. Like, you hate to play against him. You kind of wouldn't mind having him in your squad because he's just a pain in the ass and constantly in the ref's ear. But he really doesn't score a ton of goals. He's not a goal machine. And that's where Schalke, in my opinion, I would have concerns, is where are the goals coming from? Defensively, they just broke down at the end because, again, I just don't think they're that good. Stambouli is now also injured for a while. And like you said...
Yeah, you should be out for the year, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like you said, they have a very thin squad, and what they do have coming behind them is pretty poor quality, comparative to maybe what they were thinking they could get to. For some reason, I think if you look at the depth of quality of bench that Bayern or Dortmund or Leipzig or Gladbach or a few other teams have, they have more quality depth than Schalke does at this point. But that being said, Schalke played well. They had a good match plan that they executed well, and Dortmund played right into it. They played into Schalke's strengths and did not exploit Schalke's weaknesses, and that's a concern for me because I still don't think Schalke are that good of a side. You could see when Dortmund did turn it up, also before the 75th minute, they could get around and through Schalke's press pretty quickly, and a lot of times the moves broke down because of really bad passing from Hakimi in particular, but Sancho as well, when they were coming from the wide, trying to come in, and it just broke down because of just horrendous passing. Not that they were put under pressure or Schalke's positioning was that great. It was just poor passing. It was just a little enough off that it didn't get to where it needed to be. That happened over and over and over again. Had they been sharper in that passing, I think we would have seen a different match because they could have gotten around Schalke's press relatively easily.
So here's the thing. I am quite torn about how this game went, because on the one hand, I think if I want to take the 20,000 foot view or feet view, whatever, the macro view, I think Dortmund at this point in their development should be very comfortably be able to deal with pressing sides, because the Bundesliga over the last couple of years has been a pressing league, and it's the Bundesliga itself, I think, is evolving a little bit, that teams are starting to manage to create a little bit more on the ball and without the turnover far up the field and whatnot. But nevertheless, I still think that Dortmund should have the capacity and the positional play and also the players to play around that sort of pressing. Obviously, there's no team in the world that's immune to a good counter-pressing and pressing in general, especially when it's very intense. That is normal, but I still think, over the accumulation of plays, Dortmund should have done better. And I also believe that at this point, under Lucien Favre, I think we should have been away from the Witsel-Delaney partnership in such a game. I understand why you want to have Delaney in this game, because it's obviously always going to be a very physical game, and you want that in midfield. But also, do you think that the capability to play around the pressing with maybe a Julian Weigl or maybe Julian Brandt or whatnot, in theory, should be available to Lucien Favre and be utilized in such a game? Now, the problem is, at hand currently, there is not that luxury. I don't think that if you put Julian Weigl next to Witsel, that Dortmund actually successfully play around Schalke's pressing whatsoever, just because the positional play isn't sharp enough overall that if you change just one player, it really enables the entire structure to function better. I just don't believe that is true right now. So I understand why Delaney played in this game. I'm just saying overall, in general, we shouldn't see the Witsel-Delaney partnership in this game in particular. Maybe you want to see it against Bayern or so, who knows? But it's just annoying that Dortmund have such a poor ball retention. But on the other hand, I agree with you. It's not that everything Schalke did was so superb that Dortmund completely fell apart. I think there was a lot of self-inflicted harm. And as Marco Reus said, this team is out of form individually and collectively. I thought that was a very precise and defeating way to describe it. And as you said, there were so many unforced errors, and I think the most blatant one was from Jadon Sancho, where he just played it, literally into the middle in Dortmund's build-up. And I think this is when Serda then ended up hitting the post, because of course Mats Hummels would clear the ball in Delaney's face and it would fall right into the path of Serda. But what I'm trying to say here is there's a balance of Dortmund being completely incompetent, not in their development where they are, and Dortmund being completely incompetent because just current form is not there as it should be, and there were just so many misplaced passes and just very bad first touches. That was a complete trampoline game when it comes to first touches, and it was just infuriating to see. So, you can only speculate what could have been had Dortmund strung a couple of passes better. But then there's the third aspect, and this is what Favre mentioned and Alexander Nübel mentioned, is just the lack of vertical runs and smart runs into the box. Whether you want to argue about Dortmund needing another striker or not, I think if you play with Götze and the way Götze played in recent months, I think that's beside the point, because we know this team is capable of doing it because they have done it before in pretty much the same shape. So that is, to me, very annoying. And I think Alexander Nübel said that it's easy to defend against Dortmund because they're unwilling to enter the box. And Lucien Favre said, I think in an interview in the end with ZDF or WDR, but one of the public channels in Germany, he said that Dortmund's vertical runs were lacking. And if you don't make these runs, you end up playing lateral passes and then you get punished and pressed for it. And I think this is a big problem. But it's good to know that the coach knows and maybe will work on it. And my question to you, Matthias, is, and I know you will only be able to speculate and not actually answer it, but how do you fix that, and where do you think the source of the problem lies? Do you really think, as Marco Reus said, it's down to courage, that they just don't think, the darting run into the box or wherever will do any good, and then you just don't do it? Is it the lack of motivation, or I don't even know where it comes from that Dortmund just don't make the runs they ought to make to really break up opponents, draw defenders out of position, etc.?
Well, I mean, there are a few things, and I know I kind of ranted about it last week as far as makeup of a team and the DNA of a player and how they like to play, but I think that also comes into the equation here. I listened to On the Continent last week, and James Horncastle was talking about Dortmund against Inter, and Dortmund actually had the perfect formation but the wrong players in the attacking sense. And what he meant by that, and I completely agree with it, if you take Paco out of the team, the majority of your attacking players, with Marco Reus being the one exception, but again, he's not 100% fit after the flu, none of them have that striking, attacking drive. There's a trait in the game Football Manager that says looks for the pass, or avoids taking a shot and prefers to look for a pass. That encapsulates Sancho, Hazard, Brandt, Götze. They're the type of players that are looking to play the killer pass when they need to play the killer shot at times. How many times do you see Sancho running and then he cuts back and holds it up and looks for a pass? You need a little bit more directness at times, especially if you're looking at scoring goals. And that was just lacking. The only one who would occasionally do it was Reus, because he's a little bit more of a direct player in that sense. But again, he was off his game. He's recovering from the flu, so I'll kind of put that outside. Götze obviously was dealing with some issues himself, so that's really what was missing. And then on top of that, you compound it by putting Hakimi in there, who was just had a bad day. I mean, he had a horrible day. He's had brilliant days, but this was definitely not it. And that's how quickly those things can break down. And that courage, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say, they're chicken shits that don't want to run into the box. But, I'll leave that to Marco Reus. He knows his teammates better than I do. And maybe he was talking about himself. But
I think he was talking about the team.
Yeah,
in general.
but overall, I just think the makeup of the players you're asking to score the goals aren't really the type of players that are going to score the goals as their first instinct. Paco Alcácer, his first instinct is to try to score a goal. Aubameyang came over as a winger, but his first instinct was to be a striker and score goals. Lewandowski, his first instinct is to score a goal, not to pass. Even if we go to the Schalke side, you look at Matondo, his first instinct was to try to score a goal. Now, he sucks at it, apparently, but he tried.
And not against Leipzig.
No,
he's just very
exactly. But against Dortmund. And again, if we look at how Schalke played, and we can transition to defense because of how they transitioned out of defense, was usually a long ball into space, using Matundo's speed to exploit the slight lack of speed that we had at our center back pairing. And that's really, those are some of the issues when you compound that all together, put it all together. Also that our attacking players dropped deeper to try to get the ball because we were also positioned deeper. There was no real midfield press to try to win the ball back at the midfield line so you could transition quicker and have those attacking players in better positions to try to score. Because when we did do that, in those final 75 minutes, there was dangerous attack after dangerous attack. So you need to do that sooner, is where you're doing your press. If you're sitting really deep like we were again far too many times, just backing off against a team that, in my opinion, lacks any true playmaker. Harit is not a playmaker. But why are you doing that? Who are you afraid of in Schalke's side? Be cognizant of the long ball over the top. That's why you're not going to press all the way up top of the pitch, but engage them at the midfield line. And then your transitions will be quicker to your attacking players, that they're in a position to be dangerous and exploiting the weaknesses of Schalke also in terms of pace. But that just wasn't there. And then on top of that, you then sometimes were out of position. Schalke whacked the long ball over the top, and Matondo just outran the players. And that... because also Delaney and Witsel aren't exactly speed demons. And our fastest players, I mean, Piszczek isn't as fast as he used to be.
Not at all.
Guerrero, he's also not super fast, but he's okay, but his positioning lets him down at a fullback. The guys that have the speed would be like Hakimi, but he wasn't an attacking third. So you compound all that together and you get what we saw. So it was wrong on so many different levels in individual slices, and together it made Schalke look so much better than they were, but still credit to them for playing well or playing decently, and compounded the situation for Dortmund, again playing into their weaknesses and Schalke's strengths.
Yeah, you know what I love about this podcast in the last weeks or so is that it often happens that someone revises their opinion within one monologue. And I truly enjoyed that you asked whether Dortmund have a lack of courage, and then 2 minutes later ask, what are you afraid of?
Well, yeah, I mean, asking who are you afraid of? Not are you afraid of... I mean, you're not playing against Cristiano Ronaldo or Leo Messi. Yeah. There was more courage with Messi on the pitch, to be honest, or playing against Barcelona. It's like, I don't get it. Schalke isn't Barcelona. I mean, nowhere near Barcelona. And so who were you afraid of that was going to play the killer pass to unlock your team? In that sense, with Schalke, there's nobody. There's nobody there that you go, oh, crap. They don't have Emil Forsberg, who's able to play that kind of pass. They don't have... It just... I didn't get that. And I even tweeted about it during the match. I said, I miss pressing. Because it just... When we did press in those last 15 minutes, I hate using the total we because you and I didn't play on the pitch, but you know what I mean. When Dortmund did press in the last 15 minutes, obviously Schalke was a bit tired at that point as well, but you could see that it could work. So where was that? And when it did happen situationally, it looked good, and then a bad pass happened, and it all broke down. A long ball, and it just, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, there were phases of the game where Schalke could not get beyond the halfway line in any meaningful way, where Dortmund just would counter press, force a long ball, and then gather it right up and then start the next wave of attack. So you definitely have a point. And I do wonder if this derby helps Dortmund to rethink their approach a little bit. Just because Lucien Favre said that he's missing the vertical runs in the box. Dortmund have in recent games often lacked these runs, and the entire distribution and positioning in the penalty area just completely sucked. I don't have a better word for it. So maybe Dortmund decide that they will become quote unquote less patient and a little bit more direct and a little bit more urgency. And maybe these demands have to come from the players and from the other figures in the front office, because Lucien Favre himself as a coach is a bit more reluctant, but maybe overall there is a bit of a rethink now, because obviously we have seen now weeks and months of the same problems, and they're apparently not going to just fix themselves, and apparently it's just getting worse in terms of confidence and self-belief, and that is obviously not the place you want to be. And I hope, and the evidence will be brought in front of us in the next weeks and months, where Dortmund will play a lot of big games, but I really do hope that Dortmund shed a little bit of that. We'll just keep the ball and deliberately probe for the opening and whatnot. I think the willingness to commit an error up front should be there more. That you're not too afraid or too whatever to just play the ball, and even if it doesn't come off, then you maybe just use your counter pressing. I would like for Dortmund to be a little less risk averse. I mean, this is exactly what we've been saying the recent weeks, but I really do hope that this derby has changed something, and then that these 2 drop points turn into more value as we continue, because we're still clearly seeing a Dortmund coach that is trying to tinker with the team a lot, that's trying out a lot of things, and So maybe he will eventually find something better that actually works, because right now I think he's throwing a lot against the wall and sees what sticks, and right now there's not a lot sticking, so who knows? Matthias, I thought though, in retrospect, it was really, really good for Dortmund to not lose this derby, because otherwise I think it would have propped up Schalke just way too much and probably deflated Dortmund way too much. I'm not a big fan of let's lose so we can get better mentality. I think a draw like this and non-performance, if you will, where you just, get hammered without getting hammered, could do the same trick, because that would have just also sucked from a fan perspective.
Well, I agree 100%. I mean, I think we'd mentioned it. The result was okay. The performance to go along with the result, I'd say 70%, 80% of it was not as okay. I'd be a point away at Schalke. I'm okay with that. Just like I didn't have an issue with losing to Inter, I didn't like necessarily how it happened. Granted, that's a whole different match, and it's been talked about. That's not topic, but that's the kind of stuff where it's like sometimes the result's okay and the performance isn't, which thankfully that was this occasion. But we've also had it, of course, this season where the performance was pretty good for 75 minutes, but then the result kind of stung in the end. So I guess you win some, you lose some, and hopefully in this case, or as good thing as this case, we didn't lose. So whereas some other teams obviously didn't move ahead of Borussia Dortmund in the table. But the one thing I know we had talked about before recording was we're seeing a lot of Hummels Weigl again as a center back pairing. I personally had thought that with Hummels coming, in that we probably wouldn't see Weigl as a central defender anymore. What do you think the reasoning is? Is it just because Akanji seems to be a little bit dip in form right now, or what? Because obviously the lack of pace in that pairing can be an issue.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with Akanji's terrible form and the many mistakes he has committed in recent weeks that Favre just didn't want to see it. And I also believe it's a good decision, but I will also say that I don't believe that a centre-back pairing of Weigl and Hummels should be a permanent solution just because of the lack of pace and because Dortmund play with a high line. And there was someone on Twitter who made a thread over Dortmund's last 4 or 5 games where he pinpointed to Dortmund's issues when it comes to be on one line and overall just reading the game, and also a couple of mistakes that Hummels made when he just leaves his line of defense to go forward and without any success, and then the entire backline is exposed, or when Dortmund try to play offside but actually should read the situation differently and fall back. And then of course the errors in positioning when they play the offside trap, that some players just drag behind a meter or two. Here we saw it with Nico Schulz against Inter Milan fatally, and then I think Mats Hummels was guilty of that against Schalke. I think when he kept Zerda on or whatever. Overall, I do think that Dortmund have a lot of issues when it comes down to fine tuning and defensive behavior in the back line. It's not as bad as it used to be, and I think a part of that is also just the lack of pressure on the opponents who are on the ball. So that's always a bad combination to have. But in the long term, I really hope that Dortmund can make the Hummels and Akanji partnership work. And I really hope that Akanji figures out a way to get back his form and to build some chemistry with Mats Hummels. And the rest of the backline, I think the ever-changing back four that Dortmund have or apply is not really helpful in that regard to build any automatism. And I think that's actually a much bigger issue, that you have, constant changes there. So, and I also ask myself, when exactly comes the game where Favre says, okay, it's time for Hummels to have some rest? Because I don't believe he can play every match of the season. And you have to think ahead to next season, because when Hummels is injured just because he's overplayed, that's going to be a big issue that you want to avoid. So you have to work on a contingency plan there as well. But just having Weigl there in so far also helps. Is that I think Weigl right now is a little bit better with the ball on his feet than Manuel Akanji, and when Hummels is targeted by opponents and trying to suppress his passing skills, you have a wonderful passing outlet in Julian Weigl still, which can do a lot of things, especially when your double pivot is named Axel Witsel and Thomas Delaney. Then you will need some playmaker element that's central, and where else would you get it from? So I hope that it's not permanent, but I also think that Julian Weigl is not terrible and he is a valuable alternative. The only question I have is, when do we get to see the legs of Balerdi, Zagadou and Moret? Overall, I think they're capable players, and I would like to see them rotating a little bit here and there, and maybe that is the key word to go forward to the next game, the cup match against Gladbach, because at the cup, the Bundesliga match, I think Dortmund rotated quite a bit. If I'm not mistaken, Mahmoud Dahoud started. So looking at the lineup that Dortmund played against Schalke, who do you think will play again, and who do you think Favre brings into the team to have a quote-unquote fresh squad, because after that game you play against Wolfsburg?
And Wolfsburg, obviously, I think they have the best defensive record in the Bundesliga. if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to have to be on your game as far as trying to break them down. Attacking wise, they're okay. But what's he going to set up? I don't think Götze will start. I know Paco's back in training, so maybe
he's not going to play.
You don't think he's going to sit on the bench?
No.
Okay. But then I don't believe Götze will play, so that leaves you with attacking options of Brandt, Hazard, Sancho, Royce, which I think those are going to be the four players in the attack. God, please don't put Hakimi there again. I just don't think that's going to happen. I wouldn't be shocked if Brun Larsen starts against Gladbach. It wouldn't surprise me, at least. But I think Brandt as the 10 and Royce as the false 9, if you want to call it, ahead of him, that actually works. And I'm a big fan of Brandt. Maybe not Michael Rummenigge, but I'm a fan. And I think Rummenigge, who will always have a special place in my heart, given when I was coming up as a Dortmund fan, he played for Dortmund, but I think he was completely off base with his comments about Julian Brandt.
What did he say? I didn't actually see
it's something about C-Jugend, and it was just pointless. It was just a former player lying on. And I tend to ignore that overall from most players who played in the 80s and early 90s for many, many, many reasons. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's somehow your starting team. I would hope Delaney isn't playing just because he again got a facial head injury. I tweeted about it that he must be taking over the Sven Bender role as the player with the head and face injuries. So Witzel's going to start. That's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if Dahoud pairs up with him. I could see that happening. And then in the back four, I'd love to see Balerdi start and Moret start. It's just not going to happen. Simply because, Royce talked about lack of courage in the players. To me, it's a lack of courage in the coach. This is Lucien Favre. He is conservative. He is risk averse to the nth degree. That's why we're not going to see in a direct attacking play. It's just not who he is. That's how Dortmund started last season and got all those points, and then he reined it all in. Because I think he was scared that they couldn't continue that way for the rest of the season. And at the end, they may as well have continued that way. I think maybe we would have been the defending German title holders. So honestly, I expect to see pretty much the same team with a couple of little adjustments. I don't expect massive rotation because that's not what Favre does.
Yeah, we'll see. I do believe that Favre can do some rotation, to be honest. And it's a difficult game, but you got to do it. You got to change up a couple of players. I don't know if you give Jadon Sancho the trust to break out of his funk, or I don't know. I definitely want to see Torgan Hazard back in the lineup, and I'm pretty sure we will see him there because he played so well against Gladbach the last time. And that you would just assume that he's just very suited for that. I'm intrigued to find out how the tactical battle will go, because of course both coaches sort of showed their hands the last time. Just going to sit back and be surprised if Dortmund make a change or not. And I thought that Dortmund's performance against Gladbach wasn't terrible. So, obviously they conceded a lot of chances, but they would have also scored 3 if it weren't for 2 very narrow decisions. Let's call it that way, if not questionable. So I'm looking forward to another entertaining game. I believe it's another flatline game. So, why not? And Dortmund historically have fared well against Gladbach, who right now again sit atop of the table and are 3 points ahead of BVB. So we'll see. I don't know if Roman Bürki will be fit again or if Marvin Hitz has to play another game. We'll see about that. But it's certainly a game I look forward to, and I'm not overly concerned. Just now, I hope that the Review Derby has done something with this team, and maybe for the better. So I'm just going to say, let's see. But I do believe, I don't know if Mario Götze is actually injured or not, or if he can play maybe with a cast or so. Because I think it's his wrist that got hurt in that foul, which of course Felix Brüch didn't call against Schalke. So I would assume that he still plays if he doesn't opt for Brun Larsen. And I'm also kind of glad that we completely ignored the entire Götze story. That just was a complete non-story, and Bill just doing their regular bullshit that no one cares about. So thank you for that, Matthias. Otherwise, I don't know if I need to see Lukas Piszczek again. I feel like he doesn't have 2 games in him straight away over 90 minutes. So maybe we'll see Hakimi as a right back again. But who knows? It's going to be a very interesting game nevertheless. So that's all I'm going to say, because I mean, we just had this game and there's not too much to speculate. So do you just want to give a prediction, or do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you said everything that needed to be said. Also in terms of Bild, i.e. Mourinho, that crazy rumor bullcrap that came out that way. So I think it will be an entertaining match. I'm going to go for 2-2, and then a penalty shootout that can go any way. But since Roman Bürki apparently can save penalties, which when Inter got their penalty, I turned to my nephew and went, oh, well, he's not saving that. Well, of course I was wrong, thank God. So I'm going to go with Dortmund winning it in penalties.
Well, see, I'm a little bit different here. I believe that it's going to be 1-1 or 2-2 after regular time, but I believe that similar to Schalke, Gladbach eventually will, just be completely tired, because they had to play in the Europa League, which is more straining, and that means they had to play on a Sunday, so they have 1 day less to recover. And I think in such a cup game, when you play 120 minutes, that will make a lot of difference. And in the later stages of the game, where neither team is as compact as they are in the opening minutes, I think this is the hour of Julian Brandt, where he will do his magic, and then Dortmund will slowly but surely dissect Gladbach and play better than their counterparts and come away with a win in overtime. That's my prediction. So I'm going to say 2-1 Dortmund after 120 minutes. So
perfect.
I guess we can leave it here and wrap it up. And I hope we have, been a little bit more positive, especially after that Revier Derby. I don't think there needed to be another episode to just pile on. And for whatever reason, my gut feeling just tells me things are going to get better, despite everything that I see and observe. It's just a gut feeling, but maybe it's onto something. Who knows, Matthias? So anyway, please tell our dear listeners how to get in touch with you on Twitter.
Yes, you can find me at Matthias Suk on Twitter, and I agree with you. I tend to try to be the podcast optimist, and so I'm also optimistic that things are going to turn around. I'd rather have a poor start and a strong finish rather than a strong start and a poor finish, because we know how that ended last season.
Exactly. So it's all going according to the plan. No, but more honestly, if you want to read what Marco Reus actually said after the game, and what Michael Zorc said about not having a coaching discussion but still leveling some blame at Favre, you can do that on theyellowwall.net, where you will be inclined to pay $1, which will go to my healthcare fund, and then you can read all our written content there, which I would incline you to do, please. And otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter at Stefan Butzko. You can follow the Yellowwallpod on Twitter at Yellowwallpod. Same goes with Facebook. And if you want to subscribe to our show, please find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube by now. And I think you can also find us on on Amazon and Google Music and whatnot. So lots of options. You can find our RSS feed if you want to plug it manually into your podcatcher. You can find it also on theyellowwall.net. So that is everything from us for, I wouldn't say this week. We still have to preview the Wolfsburg game. So for the first part of the week, as always, everyone out there, stay safe and thank you for listening. Goodbye.